All right. Hope you enjoyed your break. Welcome back to the Left-Handed Bandit interactive virtual paint experience. At this point, our canvases should be nice and dry. So, one way to test to make sure that they're dry is to take your fingers and lightly tap them with your canvas. As you're tapping, if you feel some stickiness, that means your canvas is still wet. If it's pretty dry to the tap, then you should be all set to go. So, I'm gonna go ahead and begin by making sure my brushes are nice and clean. I'm gonna make sure that we have some yellow left. I'm gonna make sure we have a little bit of yellow left, at least the size of a dime. Yellow, I'm gonna make sure we have a little bit of blue left, again, about the size of a dime. We want to make sure we have some regular color, solid red, our original red color left over. We want to make sure we have just a teeny bit of green. It's not much. We're gonna make sure we have some white and some black. We won't really need too much more pink. But again, at least if you have at least the size of a dime for all colors, or maybe just a little bit less, we can work with that. You don't necessarily have to pour any more paint. This is the back end of the painting. This will not take as long as our first half of the painting. All we have to do is add our details, some line work, and some highlights, and we're all set to go. So let's jump right into it. What I'm gonna use for this next part of the painting is that same bigger paintbrush that we've been using. So I'm gonna make sure the bigger of the two paintbrushes is nice and clean. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start adding in more details to both the wine bottle and the wine glass. I'm gonna start with the wine bottle. I'd like you to take just a little bit of yellow paint, just a teeny bit of yellow. And with that little bit of yellow paint we have, I'm gonna look at the bottle. I'm gonna put a streak of yellow paint right here in the neck of the bottle, right in the middle. You don't even have to blend it in, just kind of slap it on there. I'm gonna take a little bit more yellow paint. I'm gonna add it to the lip of the bottle, maybe somewhere over here. Make sure it's nice and visible. And again, I'm doing this almost freestyle. So maybe a little bit right here, and a little bit right over here. I wanna make sure it's visible. What I'm gonna do next is rinse your paintbrush off in water, get it nice and clean, tap both sides off, and then dab it on the paper towel. Nice clean paintbrush. Next, we're gonna switch to blue paint. So I'm gonna take just a teeny bit of blue paint. A little bit of blue is all you need. And I'm gonna go to the bottle again. And I'm gonna add a streak of blue on the right side of the bottle. I'm gonna add a streak of blue at the tip as well. And if you wanna add some in other areas, be my guest. I'm almost freestyling and adding it on. An optional point, or an optional step I should say, is you can take this blue and amplify it by adding just a teeny bit of white. So if you have that blue on there, you can wipe the paint off your paintbrush and onto the towel and go and grab some white and just add a teeny bit of white into that blue paint. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna create some light blue or some baby blue. And it's just gonna add more detail, more shine detail to your paint bottle, sorry, your wine bottle. But again, that step is optional. You don't have to do that. So I'm all set with my yellow and my blue. So I'm gonna rinse my paintbrush off again in water. Rinse it around, tap it on the side of my cup, dab both sides off with my paper towel. Now I am ready for some orange paint. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna take a small amount of this red paint. I'm gonna find another corner of my yellow paint. I'm gonna mix up some orange paint. And get it as nice and vibrant as we can. So I got some orange paint mixed up. I don't need a crazy amount of it. But with this orange paint, what we're gonna do is, since this wine is nice and dry to the touch, I wanna add in some more details to make that wine pop. So as I'm adding this in, remember to follow the direction of your wine glass and your lines. And I'm going to literally hold the paintbrush in the middle, and I'm going to randomly add some dabs of orange to this glass. And It's going to be almost unnoticeable until you start layering up. So feel free to add some more orange on top of that orange. For this step, globs are okay. So for this step and this step only, it's okay to have globs of paint because we're working towards the end of the painting and we're going to be done pretty soon. So I'm using this orange to add some more highlights, add some more color and funk to my piece. You don't need too much of it. You should be able to see that orange fairly. After we're done with the orange, I'm gonna go ahead and rinse my paintbrush off again. Get them nice and clean. What I'm gonna do next is I'm going to go back to my red. So I'm using solid red with that same paintbrush. Make sure it's nice and clean. And I'm going to do the same thing I did with the orange with the red. And I'm gonna randomly add some brush strokes here and there. Super random, freestyle brush strokes. And this is just adding more contrast and tones and values to our painting. And in the long run, it's gonna pay off because it's just gonna give it a more funky, festive look. So I added just a little bit of red to some of those areas. Maybe kind of hard to tell in this painting, but in person at home, you should be able to see the difference between where the red and the orange is as opposed to those maroon colors that we added earlier. So now that we have that, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make sure that brush is cleaned off. But for this step, you have two options, and we're getting towards the end of our painting. We essentially just need to add our black and our white. And when I say black and white, we need to add black outlines and then finally white highlights. Our white comes final. For this next step, we're going to be using a fair amount of black paint. And again, whether you like the smaller brush or the bigger brush, you're going to use whatever's most comfortable for you. For my wine glass, I'm going to use my smaller brush. For the bottle, I'm probably going to switch to the big brush. We'll see how things go, but you can switch back and forth if that makes you comfortable. So kind of experiment and see which one feels the best as we're doing these things. Another thing I want to point out while we're doing this step is we want to be able to make sharper, tighter, skinnier lines for these details. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our paintbrush, find our black, and just like I'm doing right now, add some drips of water to our black paint and water it down just a little. Don't get it super watery. Maybe mix water into half of the amount of black paint that you have, or maybe even a third. That water is gonna get in that black paint, it's gonna thin it up, and it's gonna make it easier to work with. Thinner paint is much easier to work with and it stretches out. Another thing that I wanna mention for this next step is when we grab our paintbrush, when we're working with these blacks and these whites, we wanna smooth both sides of our paintbrush out in the paint. And that's gonna make us paint with sharper, tighter, smoother lines. So to smooth your paintbrush, all you have to do is take the paintbrush, take one side, swipe it in your black or whatever color you're using, and then flip it over and swipe that area nice and flat against your surface of your plate. And what you do there is that makes the brush nice and flat, maybe a little hard to see. And when you have a flat brush, you can turn the angles and control your lines and make sharper, tighter, smoother lines. So every time you grab more black paint, make sure you're doing this. So we're getting towards the end of the painting, so you're gonna see things speed up a lot more. Feel free to rewind if you need to, but I'm essentially going to do all of my line work. So I'm gonna do this fairly fast. So I'm gonna start with my bottle first, even though I said I'd start with the wine glass. And everywhere where we can see black, or where there was black earlier, I'm simply going over that again. The black lines always tie our paintings together. That's why we save it for last. At this point, you might be saying, ooh, this is looking dope. So I'm putting on my black lines. I'm putting in the tip of the bottle. That's looking pretty awesome. In person, it looks even better. We add on our white highlights, it's gonna get even better. And I'm realizing as I'm painting with this brush that this brush is just a little bit too skinny for me. So I'm gonna probably do my stem with this brush, and then I'm gonna switch back to my bigger brush because the bigger brush is a little bit more comfortable for me. But if you are comfortable working with this, feel free. But for my next step, I'm going to use this brush on the stem of the glass to do some details. And then I'm gonna switch back to my bigger brush. Now, with this open space over here, we're essentially adding black to all this open space. Every time we add black, we're smoothing both sides of the paintbrush out in our paint. I'm gonna fill in these white areas over here. You don't have to do it exactly how I'm doing it. At this point, feel free to take your own creative liberties. Fill it in how you choose. Just remember, don't use too much black. Whoops, move the camera on you. Don't use too much black. A little bit goes a long way. I'm going to do the bottom of this glass, the stem, and then I'm going to just drop this in water. I'm going to switch back to my bigger brush. I'm doing the exact same thing with my bigger brush that I was doing with the smaller brush, except this will allow me to go faster, and I'm just much more comfortable with this brush, probably because I've been using it for the last hour. So, smoothing both sides of my paintbrush in my paint, and I'm going to go ahead now and start outlining the actual wine itself. So feel free to have some fun, play around with what you see, may or may not work. Smooth both sides of your paintbrush out every time you go in. I'm gonna add just a little bit more water to my paint just because it's getting a little dry. And I'm gonna keep going in. Outlining my wine. Gonna get this area over here. I probably will switch back to my tiny brush again when I get to certain parts, just because that tiny brush is gonna do it better for me. And I'm going to outline the actual outer edge of the wine glass next. And be careful with this, take your time because it can be kind of tricky. So I'm going to outline over here. I got a little bit of practice, so it's a little bit easier for me to do, but I want you to take your time. I'm gonna go on the opposite side of the glass and do the same thing. Right. I'm gonna go ahead and transfer that to the top. Let's be real careful. I don't want to get jacked up. And then I'm also going to close the glass in. Can't forget this part. That's the rim of the glass. Let's close that on in. Feel free to go over it a couple of times if you feel the need to. So we got our glass outlined, and now the final parts come. So again, I'm switching back and forth between my big brush and my little brush. I'm gonna grab a little brush so I can make some sharper, finite details. We're essentially at the end of our painting. So at this point, you can do whatever you like. So I'm just gonna go in real fast and close this up because I have a smaller brush. You know, I'm gonna adjust this line just a little bit. I'm gonna go back into that wine, and I'm gonna add some more surface area. As if the wine is twirling in the glass. I can add a couple more solid black outline details. Gives a little bit more of a pop to the glass. I'm gonna add some details down here at the stem, a little bit more here. Maybe just a teeny bit more in the bottle. Starting to come together more and more. And now you can either let the canvas dry for a few, or you we can go right into this final step, which is the last step of our painting. And that final step is white. So how we thinned our black paint out with water, we can do the same thing for our white paint. And how we smoothed both sides of our paintbrush, we can do the same thing with the white paint. So I'm gonna grab some white paint. I've added a little bit of water to it to thin it down. I'm smoothing both sides of my paintbrush out in my white paint, and I'll show you how that looks again. Each time you grab some paint, smooth both sides of the paintbrush out. And that's gonna flatten your brush and allow you to make those sharper, tighter lines. This white paint should add a nice pop to the painting, as long as the canvas stops moving for me. But you're gonna see it adding a lot more funk to your final painting. And it can be easy to go overboard with this white step, so try your best not to go too overboard. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little bit of a highlight back here, grab some more, a little bit of a highlight back here. I'm gonna add some to the front, right about here. I'm going to go in the actual wine itself and add some lines. Adding a little bit down here. Maybe a couple of dots to show some bubbles or something. Just kind of randomly doing this, freestyling. Feel free to take whatever creative liberties you like at this point. We are 99% complete with this painting. Maybe a couple more lines over here. Again, I myself don't want to go overboard. It's easy for me to go overboard as well. I'm going to add some more white to the stem of the glass. Couple lines here and there, maybe break some of those lines up a little bit. Then I'm going to go ahead and add a glare to the wine glass by curving a couple of lines in this glass space. So as I'm painting these lines, I'm following the outline of the glass. I'm kind of curving my brush strokes, and that's going to add that outer glare to show the three-dimensional aspect of our glass. And this thing is really coming together. So maybe add a little bit of a curve right here as well. A little bit right here. I don't want to go overboard too much. I just want to illustrate the point that it's a transparent glass. Okay. Now we have those things, and at this point we are completely finished with our painting. Feel free to add whatever finite details you want to add, and don't forget to sign your piece. I'm just going to put my initials, and I'm all set. So that's it. We have our final painting. We have our wine pour. Feel free to paint the bottom part of it if you like and go back. Otherwise, oh, sorry, we have to go ahead and fill in that green as well. You can do that on your own, fill in the rest of the bottle. But this is our final product, essentially. And that's all I got for you. So thanks again for your support, and thanks for tuning in with the Left-Handed Bandit, and I hope you enjoy your night.